find a way.
Logan, people come into Bristol, and one of the first things they see if they come from the airport is Bristol Motor Speedway.
Mm-hmm.
And it always stuns people because it's like this massive structure that should not be here.
Right.
It's like this huge imposing structure. And like you guys have gotten 170,000 people in there for a football game. Getting ready to have 110 for a baseball game, something like that.
Yeah.
Setting records in all these sports. It has been the fan favorite in NASCAR for years. And people are struck by the building, but living here, it's not the structure that's so special and the magic about Bristol Motor Speedway. It's the culture there. And it's this. When you've lived here a long time, you start to see just how magical the culture is. It's not about that structure. And I'm so glad you're here because you have had a front row seat to what's been going on there and how that culture has been built for so many years. And you are one of the most liked and respected people in Bristol. I hear that all the time.
Well, I'm not sure about that last thing.
So that is true. I know you're not going to say it, but I am so glad you're here because there's so much I want to know about that culture at the Speedway and about what you've seen and what leadership looks like to you. If you were to try to name that culture at the Speedway, what words would you use?
Well, first, thanks for having me. And you first started the conversation and you started talking about magical, and I thought you were going to use the word people, and I was going to follow that up. Well, yeah, it's the people, but it's the culture. It's not just the people. You can get people that have certain skill sets and can follow certain tasks, and they know marketing or they know operations, but if it's the culture, it's the fit of them, and it's hard to describe. Our mission, we've spent a lot of time developing our own mission, vision, and service values. We call them service values rather than values, but our mission is two words. It's to exceed expectations. And exceeding expectations is one we struggled with and tried to come up with the right term for what our mission is. And that's an inside, it's an outside, and it's how we approach everything. It's internal for people, and it is internal with all of our staff. But it is our customers, it's our suppliers, it's the community that we're in that we care a lot about. So it's way simplified to say exceed expectations, but that's a big part of it.
That doesn't just happen. Like that's not just a decision you make in a meeting and then the next day you exceed expectations. That's much deeper and more difficult culture, probably over decades, right?
Yes, that's exactly right. I came up here in 1996, and I came up here because a very good friend of mine who was a client of mine when I was in Winston-Salem at an advertising agency and later at a sports marketing agency, he came up to run the racetrack, and that was Jeff Byrd. Jeff and Claudia came up here, and they started running this place, and there were 5 or 6 employees there, and he said, "Hey, you want to come up and join me?" And I said, "Well, I've been to Bristol one time. Let me come up and see what it's all about." And came up for a weekend for a race, and it was kind of interesting. I got to know, I knew Jeff and Claudia, and there was no question I loved those two folks. They've been friends and heroes of mine for a long time, but came up and talked, interviewed, And it was kind of crazy because the general manager from Texas Motor Speedway was up here, Eddie Gossage, who's since passed away. And he tried to slip in the back door and said, "You want to come down and talk to me? We're getting ready to open a Texas Motor Speedway. So I'd love to talk to you." So I went down and talked and, didn't really go anywhere and came back. And this is a special place. I did not know that Bristol was such a special place when I came up here.
And that was what year?
1996.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was really the coming up with following Jeff and Jeff's leadership. Jeff evolved as a leader, and his willingness to be all things to all people, love of our fans, love of our customers. I'll never forget walking with Jeff around property, and there was someone new at the Speedway, and Jeff stopped and started picking up trash, and he would put it in his pockets and asked us to carry a little bit of trash. And his humbleness and caring and wanting to be no better than anyone, no better than a fan, no better than a customer, is something that really helped form what the culture is now. And it's evolved, but culture is hard to describe sometimes. It's a real thing, but how do you describe it? And it's described by being humble and empathetic and caring. And I carry a little card in my wallet with our mission, vision, and service values in it. And service values, rather than just values, is really important. And we serve each other, and we serve our customers, and no one's better than the next person.
They only work if they're authentic,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you can't pretend to be service oriented. How important is it? How important is the leader to the culture?
The leader is important. It is ultimately the most important thing. The leader that doesn't put himself above anyone else. I mean, he's got to lead, and he's a mentor to everyone, but especially key people. But they follow his example, and the picking up trash was one example, and there's so many more. There are examples of walking around after a race and sitting down in a campsite with somebody and talking to the fans and asking them how their experience was, and maybe having a cocktail. Or some of our fans, I don't know if you're aware, some of the fans might bring some type of illegal moonshine product. Yes, and there have been times where even the best of us have consumed some of that, and we're not above, being who we know who our customer is, and we're going to love them. And it's the same thing for the customer that sits at the top row of the Wallace Grandstand in the upper deck that is way far away, and it's the same approach we take to the customer that sits in the corporate suites and the president of the company. Yeah,
it's little things like you go to the race and you see employees racing around on golf carts, but they're never too busy to pick up a fan and give them a ride on the golf cart. It's like little things like that don't happen everywhere.
Well, and that's a great example. I'm glad you picked up on that, because we have I don't know if it's an unwritten rule or if it's written somewhere, but we do not drive around on an empty golf cart. And Jeff and now Jerry, they're the examples of that. They're going to stop. If they're by themselves, they're going to stop and pick up a fan. And sometimes we'll get so tight and so busy, that we're saying, hey, we're just going to go to this part of the Speedway. Is it okay if I take you this far? But most of the time we'll change our path and take somebody where they want to go. And that leaves it's the right thing to do. I mean, basically, it's just doing the right thing, and it once you do it a few times, we're rewarded as much as the fan, because the fans will say, well, doggone him, I was at such and such and such and such, and I've never had anybody stop who's with the raceway, and especially if it's somebody like who's the general manager or the president of the Speedway, picking them up and taking them somewhere.
Right. Yeah. It's just, but it goes back to that. It goes back to that culture. Yeah. And Jeff Byrd is I don't know how you describe. He's just a larger than life legend in Bristol, and he's had such an impact on so many people. It's the hundreds of thousands of fans, right? Like, people don't understand, like, these race events are so big. but it's the day-to-day, the influence that he had on employees and people that worked under him. I didn't experience that directly, but I know so many people that he had this lasting influence, and they're just different people because of it.
Well, thank you. I think I'm a different person. I know many people feel the same way. People feel the same way when Jeff got sick and knew that he may not be around forever. He made a point to work with Jerry and to do even a deeper mentorship with him and help him. And it's the perfect person, because Jerry Caldwell had all the same traits, and the intelligence and the caring that Jeff had. And it's just amazing how it has been virtually seamless, the move from Jeff to Jerry, and the way that this Speedway operates. As a matter of fact, in some ways, Jerry's taken it to the next level. Yeah. And it's happened at a time where, interestingly enough, the Speedways, all Speedway motorsport racetracks have been very, very decentralized. And it was like we made every decision corporate. You'd check in, but it's become, the corporate area has become a little bit larger, more disciplines there, more corporate reports. But we have kept, as many of our other tracks have, the same identity and the same decentralization from how we operate. Each track has its little bit of its own personality, and we've continued, I think, to be a favorite track, not only because of what goes on the racetrack, which almost all of that is beyond our control. So you want to control the controllables, and we control the controllables by treating these folks like they should be treated. They don't have to come back to us. They've got lots of choices to spend their entertainment dollars, and so
the business has gotten a lot more difficult and challenging.
It has
since Jerry took over, but the culture, it's like, a lot has changed. A lot has had to change. You have to evolve in a business like that. But that culture of exceeding expectations, that's still central.
Absolutely, it is. That's never changed, and really important. And as we look at other, I think, great examples of cultures and service, it's hard to. Service is part of our culture and each other. And I look at companies like Zappos and Amazon, and it's odd to say, but Ritz-Carlton, and just the cultures that those people have that is service centric. They're just great cultures, and those don't change if leadership changes. Now, part of that is putting the next leader in there that is also understands what the culture is.
Do you remember back to the beginning when you were trying to figure out what those core values were?
Yeah. Yeah.
What were those conversations? Try to take me into those conversations.
I probably don't remember it as well as I should, because I'm getting to be a little bit older, and all those memories don't get there. But we knew what we did, but we didn't articulate it. We didn't really have, when we first got here, we didn't have a mission or vision or service values. And so we recognized, Jeff recognized, Jerry was in the thick of it because he was an employee here. But we realized that we needed to start defining that. And let's define who we are. So we had people help us. We had lots of offsites. One of our employees was our in-house corporate attorney, Julie Bennett, who's now with Ballard, and she took the lead in some of those, in organizing some of our sessions where we would go through learning. We brought in outside consultants, the wrong word, because I never felt like we brought in somebody that was going to just bring some system to us, but we would have people that would lead us in our offsites and lead us in our planning. That's a really difficult thing. And I think every organization wants to have that kind of culture that lasts generations and is here after they leave. Getting that started is really difficult because most people aren't able to achieve it. Mm-hmm. I think the details matter. Like how many people were in the room in these conversations? I would say there are different levels of conversation. The core group, 10 to 12, and those were senior management people. But we'd never really go all the way until we involved more, until we went deeper and got more deeper with conversations with folks. But always, there was never a feeling that we had a wrong answer. We approach things with whiteboards or flip charts, and if somebody in the room if I didn't agree with somebody, I would zip it up and let's discuss that at another time as we're going through our processes of trying to develop who we are. And certainly we all had ideas and concepts that we wanted to die on the sword by, but we would let's look at this as a whole, let's look at all this, and then let's come back and vet different areas. So it was a very open process in which we'd eventually have to get together, and we'd somehow magically, I don't know how, magically we came to conclusions that everybody seemed to shake their head on. And that's without compromise, too.
I'm curious because Jeff was such a big personality. He wasn't like he had this way of like making everyone around him better. But like Jeff Byrd was a big personality, right? When he walked in the room, it was something because there was so much respect for him. How did he foster this conversation and like empower other people in the room with such a big personality? Did you see a way that he was able to do that?
I don't know if I can describe totally that. There were times that Jeff was on the opposite end. He had a voice in there the same way that everyone else had a voice in there. We had voices that we were always encouraged to speak up. And quite frankly, that doesn't happen all the time. You can encourage somebody, but unless the people speak up and unless that's handled in the right manner by the leader, then it's going to end and people aren't going to speak up. I remember one session which one of the guys that actually worked with me put his hand up and talked for 5 minutes about an issue. And Jeff's comments, I'm not going to get this exactly right, was, well, I don't agree with that, but I sure am glad you stood up and you started talking about what you believed in. And those moments, there are still times that we'd sit in a room and we'd have leaders and there would be, well, I could tell, because sometimes I do the same thing. I said, well, what does Jeff think, or what does Bruton think, or what does Jerry think, or what does this guy or woman think about it? But there's always the encouragement to not just listen to that and take that as the gospel. We're all better as a whole than we are as one person. This is off subject a little bit, but it's still relevant from my perspective. I'm going to get this wrong. I'm going to say it wrong. I'm going to say the verse wrong, but to things that people are provided, we are provided. I'm getting the verse wrong. To much that is provided, much is expected. What's the verse? Yeah. You know. Do you know? I'm sorry. I'm doing the same. Oh, obviously I'm not. Much is expected. Yeah, much is. And we've been given a lot. We've been given sellouts. We've been given votes by people as the most popular racetrack out there. And that means more is expected of us. And part of that expectation is caring.
I know I've known a lot of people that work at the Speedway, and they all point to that moment right before the race starts, and you see all of these people and all of the jets flying over, and it's just like that's the moment that you feel so proud of. And when you talk about these opportunities that you're given to be on the team that throws that kind of party, that's a privilege, right? That not many people get.
Yeah, we used to have, and I'm mostly retired now, and still helping out with primarily community outreach and engagement things. And I go to leadership meetings and I go to planning meetings, but I'm not there every day like I was for a long time. The everyday folks would gather, a lot of folks, and it didn't matter what level you were, right before the race started, and go down to turn 3 right outside the fence. And there'd be, if you could make it, there'd be 20 or 30 people down there from white collar to blue collar that would be down. And Jeff was always down there. Jerry's been down there, where we sat there for the start of the race. And, things are flowing through the air, and it's just crazy. But it was just a special moment to gather, and then everybody scrambles and gets going with their own thing.
Yeah, it's such a cool event. So figuring out like what you believe in. It's interesting here when you came in 1996 that there was something here. Obviously, like it was a big important venue then. But you said that they couldn't name what it is. And I think there's a lot of organizations like that. I think there's a lot of nonprofits like that.
Right.
Who are doing good things, doing important things. They haven't really named it. And until you name it, you really can't build on it.
Well, we've got this little card that you can see. People listening can't see. That is our mission, vision, who we are, what we are, and our service values. And I've said a couple of times, our values are all hinged around serving. And it's serving each other, and it's serving our community, and it's serving our fans. And that just evolved. It became part of it. Just seemed to be, what do we do? We don't control racing. we have sanctioning bodies and we have drivers that come in, and it's not a controllable. We can do some things to manipulate the racetrack a little bit, but we don't. The drivers are going to do what they want, and they're going to run how they want. But if we can control how we serve the drivers, the teams, the fans, the sponsors, the people that are at our facility at that time, and we do everything we can to make them feel at home, try to differentiate us. How do you differentiate? I mean, you do special things for them, but you just serve them. And we don't say no very often.
I think that exceed expectations, and that's what it sounds like that's what you landed on in 1996. Yeah. Is that the real core of it that came out of those conversations?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And I'll give you one example of exceeding expectations. I don't care what the sport is or whether it's arts, if you're doing events, you're going to run into people that aren't having the best experience. And, no matter how much wonderful the music is, or, it could be the fault of no one. But we are empowered to fix problems. We're empowered, everybody. And I don't care if you're working in operations, if you're working in the ticket department, if you're working in customer service and you have somebody with a problem, we're empowered to help them. Have somebody that's lost their tickets and they're not in their account and it's somebody else's because somebody gave them their tickets and you can't really run it up. Well, we're empowered to give them tickets. We're empowered if somebody buys some food and they don't like it, we're empowered to give them some money and take care of that food. And that's not just managers. We're empowered to make the guest experience turn from a negative to a positive.
I think that's so important and really unique about that culture is that empowerment of people on the ground, like the people in the golf carts. And what you're saying is that it's intentional, that there was a decision made at some point that rather than create a bureaucracy of approvals, that we're going to empower the people that are in front of the customers to solve those problems.
And you think about different, levels is not the right term, but we've got lots of ticket windows in our office and around the track. And some of those people are part-time people. Some of them are staff people, but a lot of part-time people. And you get people come up to those windows with all kinds of issues. And we empower our employees, our part-time employees, to fix them. And sometimes that's hard to define, but you're empowered to that. And that's part of our training. It's training. We've got a core of, I don't know what the full-time employee numbers are now, 60, 70. I don't know exactly what that is. But it's not easy, but it's easier to have them understand what our culture is and to empower them and have them understand what our mission, vision, and service values are. But it's so much harder when we're employing thousands of other people on a race weekend. And these are all temporary employees. And we do it more than twice a year because we have drag events and other events where folks work for us. But that training we've got great people that do our training, our own people. But it's really an emphasis. And it's not just training of if you're driving a school bus and picking up people, how to drive the school bus and where to take it. It's how to treat people and treating people from a full-time employee and getting everyone else to buy in and understand that the culture of that, the culture of giving and exceeding expectations is a challenge sometimes.
You're throwing a party for 140,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
There's got to be a gazillion things that have to be done in the weeks leading up to that.
Yeah.
So you really have to believe that spending time to train the bus driver is important.
Absolutely.
Because you could make an argument that there's a lot more important things to do.
Well, yeah, you could make an argument to that, but that's core to repeat business. It's core to exceeding expectations.
Yeah.
We have different groups that we work with from race to race. We've had a lot of folks, a lot of ETSU athletes come in and help with parking. And we've had other groups do that. And think about you're out there from beginning of the day to the end of the day post-race, because you've got to have egress and people helping with that egress all day long. And that's a long, arduous thing that you're not full-time employees. Some of those are folks that are working for a nonprofit or working for a school as volunteers. So those funding will go to that school or the not-for-profit, and working concession stands. And yeah, that's a big part of it. And I think we understand that, and we do our best to try to get people to understand it too.
Yeah. What do you think, like, so many organizations aspire to have what that Speedway culture has? Where do you think organizations, where do you think they fall short? Like, what do organizations typically get wrong that they never reach that?
I don't know. I'm not going to sling stones or arrows toward any other organization. And I'm going to start this with, we are a for-profit organization. And we care about our profit and our budget. And we've got numbers that we have to reach. But we believe that the best path to that profit and those numbers is to treat, in our business, to treat our customers the best way you could possibly treat them. They're there for vacation. They're there for entertainment. And we've lost a lot of customers in this sport because the big screen television and the recliner and their cooler next to them is an easier experience. We've got a lot of aged customers, our older demo with NASCAR especially. Drag racing is a little bit younger, and we've been doing a lot of other things to get some youth. We've dabbled in a lot of music, but we really try hard to make their experience great. But we don't think of the profit when we're going around about our business in doing that. We think about the means to the profit. The means to the profit is treating our customers right and making them want to come back again and again and again. And some folks want to do something else, which totally, there's going to be some slippage all the time. And you're not going to ever have 100%, though we sold out 55 races in a row at one time.
Yeah.
It's another time and place. But it's just don't think about making our money. When it comes to a race weekend, let's do everything we can to make our customers happy, to make our clients, to make each other's job easier. And let's do that with a smile. Let's do that with positivity. Those are long weekends, not only for all the employees that are there, but for our fans. And I don't know if you're aware, some of those fans will consume alcoholic beverages, and
occasionally.
And we are still one of those speedways where, you can buy an alcoholic beverage if that's your choice, but you also can still bring a cooler in, and we don't charge you for that. And we allow that. Is that cut into your profit, or does it help your profit? We've got some concessionaires that probably would rather us not do that, but it's the right way to treat. Will it be that way for there are other racetracks that don't allow that anymore? And I don't know, but you want them to have a good experience.
Wow. Yeah. I'm sure there's been some pressure for a lot of economic pressure to stop that.
Sure.
And you guys really believe in the experience, in the culture to allow that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not, we've got financial goals, obviously, and it's just what are the methods to get to those financial goals? And we believe in treating people the way we want to be treated. And we really care. We have people that are tasked with customer service training. We have people that are staff that are tasked with community involvement and community engagement, because this community is where we get so many of our employees for race weekend. And I say community, and it's Bristol, but it's beyond Bristol. There's a thing that NASCAR did a number of years ago, where they sent in folks to research after the race and have conversations with people about different metrics. How are the prices? How was the traffic? How was this? How was that? Bristol Motor Speedway rated the highest. They said it's off the charts of how they're treated at a race. There was no one else. And a lot of that comes from our culture and how we try to train, but it also comes from the people that live in this area, the people that are in Northeast Tennessee and Southwest Virginia and Appalachia that have the values that we have. And our values come across to these customers and these visitors, and there's something there. I didn't do the research, and I don't know what the people said exactly, but NASCAR was just over the top, and we're blessed to be. I mean, that's this geography. That's where we are, and it's a big difference maker.
Hearing you say that, it's like culture is obviously important. The creation of it, the naming of it, the maintenance of it, the training of it is important. But where you have magical results is when that culture is consistent with the people. And what I heard you say is, you had this small group of 12 people in the room that were trying to figure out who you were, who you wanted to be. But looking back, maybe it was bigger than that. Maybe it was like this region, like Appalachia, was consistent with that mission. Because when you throw a race, it's not 12 people. It's not your 50 employees. It's thousands of volunteers, but it's people waiting tables. It's the people who are in the service industry in Bristol and Appalachia, and you cross on the street, and it's like this consistent, it's not just you exceeding expectations and caring. It's like this region really cares about this event.
They do. And it's a NASCAR goes to a town, and I don't care whether it's Las Vegas or Los Angeles, it's going to make an impact. But it makes such a bigger impact in the smaller markets. And we're a pretty small market. It's also, it's that kind of, there's a short track, there's a 1.5-mile track, there's a 2.5-mile track, and then there's short tracks. And short tracks have that same type of reputation. I mean, it's it's real honest. It's what the roots of, we've got a great festival here, Rhythm and Roots. Well, this is the roots of racing, and it fits. It's just part of what this track has been for years, and how you treat the fans, and it's who we are. It's who our brand is. That this racing the way it ought to be. When Junior got out of victory lane and made the comment, got on top of the car, he said, "It's Bristol, baby." And that was coined. And there's not a lot of definition to that. But when Dale Jr. screams that, and now it's part of the vernacular, and it's Bristol, baby. And how is that defined? There are lots of ways that it's defined, but it's just Bristol.
It's authentic.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you used the word earlier. It is definitely authentic.
And it's like he named something that was here.
Yeah.
Right? Like he just didn't make that up. Like he just named something that was here. And it's like this cultural thing.
And it's stuck.
And I don't think you can take that out of Appalachia.
No.
It's consistent with this place.
Yeah, it is. There's some other great racetracks and some other great markets out there. The fact that Wilkesboro's come back to life, and the fact that they did the Clash at Bowman Gray Stadium in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, amongst a few thousand people on a racetrack that's the size of a running track. That's the same thing that's at Tennessee High, and that's roots of racing, and it's getting back. I think the multi-million-dollar teams, the multiple teams, the wind tunnels are great. It's really taken our sport to another level. But I think there are still folks that like that bumping and banging and racing hard and the roots of racing. And that's part of, I don't know, this is going to get corny, and I don't want to get corny. I mean, it's kind of it's a throwback, and we want to be in today's times for many, many things, but we also want to be a throwback when it comes to serving people and treating people the way we want to be treated, and to let them voice their opinions and listen. We're big listeners.
Yeah. What you just said there is very consistent with Appalachian culture.
Yeah.
I mean, those words you just used to describe the track is very consistent with that sounds so authentic to hear. And we get a lot of you've got a big global entity like NASCAR, and Bristol is a small market. But man, there's things here that you can't have other places. And we just had a pretty big flooding disaster.
Right.
And that event, I felt like the response to that event and the Speedway's leadership in that was brought flesh to all the culture and the authenticity that's been happening for decades.
Jerry likes to tell a story. It's not a story. He said, that wouldn't have happened if we hadn't bought a building that was a Peerless Woodworking building a number of years ago. And we happened to have this gigantic space, what we thought was a gigantic space, that we might be able to be a great depository for goods that are necessary and needed. And the rest of it became not us, TEMA became a driving force, and some volunteers became driving forces. And then it just blossomed to overwhelming response.
But the speed of it, like you guys had that, like I couldn't believe, it was unbelievable how quickly you had this major operation.
Yeah.
Like when I went I could not believe, Anthony takes us around on a golf cart. I could not believe the extent of what was happening.
It was amazing, and it was a team of people, and it came at a time where we're still scrambling to get down some Speedway and lights displays. Yeah. We're scrambling to plan for spring races. There are lots of scrambling, but there wasn't any hesitation by Jerry or the racetrack to say yes and offer this. We just happened to be the right place at the right time, and we had lots of folks step up at our place, but lots of volunteers from all over the community come in and help coordinate this. And the Tennessee National Guard, the water story you've probably heard, but the water, if anyone's ever been to our racetrack and you think about what the grandstands are like between turns 3 and 4 and the massiveness of that, we had filled up our Peerless woodworking spot and took all of that over with just water. And the caring and the giving that Appalachia, that people in this area expressed, that just doesn't happen anywhere. And we can say we're blessed. I mean, if Jeff and others went to another racetrack in another part of the country, would all of this manifested itself in the same way? Some of it would have, absolutely. But this is part of where we are, and we love where we live, work, play, and pray. I mean, this is a great community for us to be in.
Yeah. Am I correct in saying that whole operation was manned by Speedway employees and volunteers and supplemented by the National Guard, but that operation on site was volunteers and Speedway employees?
It was. The FEMA came in for a little bit, but they left, and it became, if there was any organization, it was TEMA. It was the Tennessee Emergency Management organization, and they helped a lot and were very, very valuable. At the end of it, we had some people designated just to be over there and to manage some things. But it was an employee. There were a lot of folks at the track. There wasn't anybody that was told, you've got to do this. Our folks, at the end, when we were winding down some things, we had 3 key people there, and they put their arms up in the air and said, hey, choose me. I would love to do this, and I'd love to help that. And they helped coordinate as a lot of other organizations were out and leaving, and they were just key to it. And again, it's all stems from this culture and who we are. And we were blessed to be in the right place and have this. If we hadn't bought a woodworking business a few years ago and had this great big warehouse, we couldn't have done it. And it happened to be at a location where people could get to fairly easily, and some great stories. Man, the people that would come with sedans packed with stuff, and then truckers would be coming in with tractor trailer loads of stuff. There was somebody on the way down the races one of the days I was volunteering he and his family heard about it on the way down. They were going to Charlotte for the races, and they had a minivan. And so they stopped at one of the mass market places, and they filled up their minivan with products and stopped here in line to drop off those things. It's amazing the giving and the power that of humanity. And sometimes we look around and, we're always ones to criticize. I know sometimes I am. And the giving and kindness that stemmed out of tragedy, out of really hard times. Still a long way to go. It's important that we all, the Speedway certainly is part of that we all stay involved in caring and don't think, okay, well, we've gotten past this part and, people are recovery. There are years of recovery ahead of us, and we're going to be there for it, and we'll be there doing whatever it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. It was inspiring. Like, that's the only word I can think of. It was inspiring to see just the amount of things that were done. I mean, I spent an afternoon sorting men's socks. Like you talk about a woodworking shop, that this is a massive space, just full of donated stuff. And it became a challenge, is like, what do we do with all this water, right? Right. It became a job of just trying to distribute all of this water, just literally probably a mile of bottled water. I heard at one point maybe like close to $10 million in bottled water.
I don't know the dollar figure. The $10 million would not surprise me.
It was a lot of water.
Yeah.
So anyway, it was so inspiring, but it was consistent.
Yeah.
Like, this didn't just randomly happen. It's consistent with the room you were in 1996, and the exceed expectations, and the service. The service values are still there, and they were there in a big way.
May I change the subject a little bit, but I think it's right on target with it. Our chairman, Bruton Smith, who's no longer with us anymore, lost a small child to SIDS when he was, a long time ago. And when that happened, he decided that every one of the racetracks that Speedway Motorsports owned would form a chapter of Speedway Children's Charities. And, there are a lot of good needs out there, but we decided as a company that our donations and our time supporting not-for-profits would be toward children's charities. Jeff Byrd's wife, Claudia Byrd, runs that with Betsy Holloman, and it's amazing what they do. And they cover from Virginia to Tennessee. I'm not sure how many counties, but it's a bunch. And we've got a lot of racetracks, and they're in markets like Charlotte and Las Vegas and Atlanta and Dallas-Fort Worth. And almost every year, this racetrack and this community raises more money for children's charities than any other track for Speedway Motorsports. And that fits into this culture of this community in this area where we live. Sure, it could happen. We've got great people. We've got amazing Claudia and Betsy and her board, and God, the people that care so much. But there's something about the good graces of the Lord that we're here in Appalachia and in Bristol, and there's a lot of support.
This demographic doesn't have more to give than the Atlanta demographic.
No.
Right? So what do you think it is? Like, what is it about this area that we would consistently exceed those kinds of expectations?
I don't know. It's the roots. It's still the roots. And I didn't grow up here. I grew up in Memphis and in North Carolina. But I think it's the roots of what Appalachia was. It's hardworking folks that care and have good values. And that's a little bit stereotypical, but I think that's part of it. And I think there are a lot of great leaders that understand what that culture is in this area of the country. And they haven't ignored it and tried to form different cultures. I think that's a key to it. Certainly is with us. And what our culture is part of what goes on here. And it's short track racing and lots of other things too.
They're empowering other people. Like, they're not flamboyant personalities. And it's
Right.
like humble and like empowering other. I don't know how to say it, but it's like how we do things here.
Yeah.
You know, and what leadership, I think, looks a little bit different here than it might in some other places, or maybe effective leadership does.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I listened to the podcast that you did with Kelly, and I thought she is the perfect fit as a city manager, but she's the perfect fit in this market.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's some of that's leadership and the way she approaches things.
Yeah. Well, it tends to draw the right people. It drew Jeff, it drew you, and it continues to do that. But like, the Speedway has built this culture. It's really cool to hear how that started. And it started with naming it. But it's become so much bigger than the Speedway, because I think when you look at Bristol, we punch above our weight on big events, right? Like, Speedway is the obvious example, but it's not just the Speedway now. It's like Rhythm and Roots. Like, Bristol shouldn't be doing something that big,
right?
But it's almost like it's the same kind of grit and service and same kind of values.
Yeah,
and I think it probably comes from the Speedway.
Well, thank you.
Or the Speedway's influence, at least.
That's one part of it.
Yeah.
One part of it. We had the largest attended college football game of all time. Of all time. Where was it? It was in Bristol, Tennessee. And it was two football teams that were just over 100 miles apart from each other, Tennessee and Virginia Tech. And it's just, dang, looks like we'll have the largest attended baseball game of all time coming up this year. And it's just, it's continued to shoot for the stars, exceed expectations. And, if not us, who's going to do it? I mean, we've been given by Jerry and Marcus Smith, who's the chairman now, as Racetracks, the ability to come up with these types of things. We've been given the freedom to think this way. We've got core businesses in motorsports and racing and drag racing and NASCAR, but we've also been given the ability to think about music and to reimagine ourselves and to think, how can we do things that fit with who we are? And would you think a football game and a baseball game would be what fits? But it seems so natural to us. I think it's been out of necessity that the corporate structure at Speedway Motorsports has grown some, but by no means is it what you would look up and think about large, huge companies, multi-billion-dollar companies that their corporate structure looks like. We're still more decentralized than we are centralized, but we get some good guidance and we have some very smart, caring people that are on the corporate level. So I think the decentralization, maybe use the word freedom. I don't know if it's more freedom, but it's certainly that structure allows us to think that way. And we've got leaders I know I can speak, I guess, with most knowledge about Bristol, but we've had leaders at this racetrack. They encourage us to think and to think outside the box, to be caring, and to remember that the customers are the most important thing. It's, if our finance guy listens to this, he's going to jump all over me because certainly we're fiscally responsible. But gosh, if we start with what's going to make the customer happy, what's going to be good for potentially an event here that fits into our area of the country and makes sense.
You really identified your North Star, which is your race van driving to Bristol with their hard-earned money for their entertainment. They chose not to watch the race from their couch.
Mm-hmm.
And they're carrying that cooler into the Speedway. And your North Star is that fan's experience. It's almost that simple, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And I know we use the word experience a lot, and it sounds so simple to say exceed expectations, but that's what we do. And it's how you do that to make somebody's experience better. Well, you try to make them always right. You try to cater to them, and we've all got time to do that.
You see that as a privilege, and it's the Speedway's had this just massive influence on so many people. But man, when I saw what you did in response to the flooding, it really made things tangible in a new way. So thanks for being a part of it and building that culture. And I'm just happy to be able to learn a little bit from it.
Well, thank you, Matt. Thanks for doing this podcast that you do too. Appreciate you having me.
Well, thanks for being here.
Okay, buddy.